During World War II, the Red Army possessed a unique T-34 tank with a very long gun. This tank appears in rare wartime photographs. The Russians called it the T-34 tank destroyer, also known unofficially as the T-34-57. This tank had a gun capable of destroying a heavily armored enemy tank at a considerable distance, a significant feat in the early stages of that war. Why wasn't this tank mass-produced? How many of these experimental tanks were built, and in what battles were they used? How effective was their unique gun in reality? The answers to these questions are found in Red Army archival documents, so let's examine them. First, it's worth understanding why there was a need to create a separate modification of a tank that already had a fairly powerful 76mm gun. Between 1939 and 1940, when the T-34 tank was being developed, it was initially armed with a 45mm cannon, similar to the BT-type tanks. We are talking about the first A-20 prototype. Later, a variant of the tank, designated A-32, was equipped with a 76mm L11 cannon. This cannon, when firing an armor-piercing round, could penetrate armor up to 66mm thick from a distance of 328 feet, 100 meters. For medium tanks of the early 1940s, this was quite sufficient, but not everything was so simple. It was clear that other countries would soon develop heavy tanks with much thicker armor, and a cannon capable of penetrating these tanks was needed. The Red Army artillery faced a similar situation. Even at that time, 45mm anti-tank guns were insufficiently powerful. The renowned Soviet artillery engineer Vasily Grabin, together with his team of technical specialists, created the ZIS-2 57mm cannon, which was fully capable of enhancing artillery firepower. This cannon could penetrate up to 103mm of armor when firing a standard armor-piercing shell at a range of 1,640 feet, 500 meters. Immediately after the ZIS-2 was adopted by the Red Army, engineer Grabin proposed mounting a tank version of this cannon on the T-28 medium tank. While the cannon was being converted into a tank cannon, the idea of mounting it on the T-34 emerged. From the very beginning of this work, engineers envisioned a tank with such a cannon specifically as a tank destroyer. In other words, the tank wasn't quite a full-fledged unit. Its mission was similar to that of a self-propelled gun with a rotating turret. The T-34 with the L11 cannon was a fully fledged tank, as this cannon could fire powerful fragmentation shells, allowing the tank to engage anti-tank guns and infantry, not just tanks. The 57mm ZIS-2 cannon could also fire fragmentation shells, but they were much weaker than the fragmentation shells of the 76mm tank gun. The first T-34 tank with the 57mm cannon was sent to the proving grounds for testing in early 1941. However, the test results were unsatisfactory. After installation in the tank's crammed turret, the cannon became awkward to use. After a brief trial, it was decided to install the improved ZIS-4 cannon on the T-34, which was more suitable for installation in a tank turret. The cannon was very long, and engineers had to install metal counterweights on its rear. This time, the tests were successful. The decision was made to produce a series of tank destroyers, but the factory's attention was focused entirely on the new 76mm F-32 cannon, which was intended to replace the L-11 cannon on all standard T-34 tanks. In the summer of 1941, when the USSR was already at war with Germany, workers at the Kharkov plant assembled 10 T-34-57 tanks. After testing, these tanks were transferred to the 21st Tank Brigade of the Red Army, which participated in the battle for Kalinin from October 15, 1941. Over 4 days of fighting, the Tank Brigade destroyed 34 German tanks and numerous other vehicles. However, all 10 T-34-57 tanks and other Soviet armored vehicles were also destroyed. Archival documents cite the reason for the 21st Brigade's heavy losses as primarily due to the fact that Soviet tank crews went into battle without artillery support, with the majority of the brigade's tank being destroyed by German anti-tank guns. After the loss of all tanks with 57mm gun, they were forgotten for 2 years due to other issues, such as the evacuation of tank factories to the east and the urgent production of standard tank modification. In 1943, it was decided to resume production of the T-34-57 tanks, as Germany had already developed new tank types. The ZIS-4 cannon had been improved and received new, more powerful ammunition, such as an armor-piercing round capable of penetrating armor up to 96 mm thick from a distance of 3,280 feet, 1,000 meters. Only 4 tanks with this cannon were assembled, as priorities in the Red Army had already shifted by that time. The gun was installed on the first T-34 tanks with a crew of 4. The turret housed 2 tankers, a commander and a gun loader. The commander essentially performed 2 important tasks simultaneously: observing the battlefield while aiming the gun. Visibility was very limited, and the turret itself was cramped, distracting the commander with additional duties. This ultimately significantly impacted the tank crew's performance. For example, in the German army, a medium tank had a crew of 5, with 3 tankers, a loader, a gunner and a commander in the turret. The commander had his own commander's cupola and was not responsible for aiming the gun. The Red Army only began to address this issue in 1943, when work began on a new modification of the T-34-85 tank. This tank featured a new 85 mm cannon, capable of engaging a wide range of tanks including heavy ones, and was also armed with fragmentation, high explosive and sub-caliber rounds. The turret was also larger, the crew increased to 5, and a commander's cupola was added. After this tank's appearance, work on the T-34-57 was completed, as the T-34-85 was a fully-fledged general-purpose tank capable of engaging a variety of targets, including enemy tanks and infantry. The need for a dedicated anti-armor tank was eliminated. Some Soviet sources claim that the 4 tanks assembled in 1943 were used by the Russians during the Battle of Kursk, but the Red Army archives contain very little information. Most likely the tanks were used in the rear. Only 3 tanks survive to this day, but they are not original. 1 tank was assembled from parts of several tanks, and 2 are simply replicas. During World War II, many interesting developments were made not only in tank forces but also in aviation. For example, this unusual aircraft with a searchlight instead of a nose. There is a separate video about this aircraft. The link is on the screen or below this video. See you soon!